One hand, we have the search of science for reality, and on the other hand, we have the breakup of many of our religions and the search for new means of expressing ourselves religiously. What we need to hold on to desperately at this time is the nature of ourselves. Who are we? What are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going to from here? Why are we on earth at all? Is there a purpose for existence? And these are the questions that people are beginning to ask more and more. It is an exciting time because we are beginning to move into a new millennium in which people are going to live for vast periods of time. It is hard to conceive, but nevertheless true, that your grandchildren, certainly your great-grandchildren, will live to be 140. They will be retired for 70 or 80 years. And society is not yet ready for that extraordinary expansion of leisure. What are we to do with that 80 years of existence? If you are a reincarnationist, then you will be a person who may well come back into incarnation and experience living that period of, say, 140 or 150 years. Certainly the human body has the capacity, if properly nourished, if properly tended to, has the capacity to live to be 150 years. All these factors are there building up. How will we spend our leisure? The answer to that is that we're already sick, of course, of many television programs. We're sick of hearing about the bat and its various activities, sick of hearing about all the mundane matters of life on the surface of the earth. But what we have not searched for deeply enough is the mysteries of life, and the answers to these questions that I have just listed for you. Who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here on the earth? Are we the only populated, human-populated planet in the universe? And if we are alone, isn't that a terrible proposition? And if there are other human existences on other planets in the universe, isn't that provoking? The matter of angels, then, of course, slips back into perspective when we consider all these other fascinating questions. Angels are but one splinter of human consciousness which needs to be explored. I'm a scientist. I'm also a mystic. I have my foot in both camps and try to see things as clearly as I can, as you no doubt do yourselves. We know this, that the universe is vast. We know that if this is the Earth, we have sent our space capsules out there to find out what is up in the heavens. And they have brought back to us vast information with the instruments that they are employing about the nature of the heavens. We call the points of light stars. We know that these stars together form a cluster of structures which we call the galaxy in which we live. We talk about the Milky Way beginning in one horizon and going above us and sinking below the horizon, and we are one point of light, one star in that Milky Way. We have discovered up there through scientific instruments that there are vast regions of the universe which have existed made up of subtle substances which we know very little about. We are shocked as astronomers, as scientists, to discover that there is 10 times as much material in the universe as previously conceived. We find that the galaxies themselves seem to be interpenetrated with subtle states of matter which we never took account of previously. The dark matter that I'm describing has tended to make nonsense of some features of the physics that we grew up with, the physics of Isaac Newton, the physics of Albert Einstein. We find that we have been misled, deluded into believing that we had solved all the problems of the universe. The truth is that there are subtle states of matter that are so subtle, so refined, particles so refined, that we are moving into realms in which there is emotional matter. That as I stand here now, I am generating, like you, emotional substance. It is pouring out of me, emotional substance, creating an emotional, or what we call an astral atmosphere in this room. And we do, all of us, generate this extraordinary emotional aura, as it were. We're also aware, of course, that we are mental persons, that we can create thought forms, and these thought forms are made out of mental substance. And when we start to talk about angels, we of course must understand that we're not necessarily talking about creatures that can be physically analyzed. We're talking about beings that may exist in mental form, that may have consciousnesses of their own, that may be emotional or astral structures. And so I have to begin my subject tonight, and I can only just touch upon it. I must begin my subject tonight by an analysis of what you are, what I am, how we interact with each other, and whether this whole proposition of angels isn't just imagination, whether it isn't that we create in mental substance, in thought substance, the kind of beings that we want to encounter, that we have grown up to love through our religion or through the poetry that we read, the Iliad and the Odyssey, Paradise Lost, whether we are not so powerful in thought and in feeling that we ourselves are not perhaps creating the very structures that we call angels. The proposition is very clear today that there are these subtle states of matter, and you must give me a few minutes to explain. There is, of course, solid. This is solid. We live in a world in which there are solids. We live in a world in which there is liquid, and the liquid can interpenetrate the solid like water interpenetrates the ground. We have another state of matter called air, or gas, and this gas interpenetrates water, which enables fishes to live, and both of them interpenetrate soil. We talk about these as being three states of matter: gas, liquid, and solid. If I hold up a handful of mud in my hand here, I have three states of matter interpenetrating each other. And this is what we must understand, that the present concept of the universe is one in which structures, various states of matter, interpenetrate each other. This room is interpenetrated by gases, and the proposition here is that there is subtler states which also interpenetrate gas, liquid, and solid. There is no such thing as a vacuum. Vacuum is filled with subtle, very subtle substance. And then we say that there is, in fact, interpenetrating the earth, a very fine material, not fully interpenetrating the earth, a very fine material. The theosophists call it ether, or the etheric. But we have to understand that this etheric substance interpenetrating our earth also interpenetrates you and me, man. And that's the traditional teaching of the centuries. We call it ancient wisdom. You can read about it on the walls of temples in India, in the tombs of pharaohs in Egypt, and in all ancient places. Man has got a subtle vehicle, a vehicle made of subtle material, of etheric substance, as it were. This material is made up of ions, electrified particles, if you wish, subatomic particles, particles that can go to 1,000,000,000 times smaller than an atom. And don't just say, oh, well, that's conjecture. Science is measuring them today, is able to detect them today. And so we talk about an ether body. And in ancient history, the yogis, the Hindus, have known about this vehicle, this ether body, made up of subatomic particles, made up of ions, made up of neutrinos, neutrons, and so on. And they have talked about a science called yoga, in which it has been found that the sun, the great orb, central focus of our solar system, gives off energies that science has not yet registered, and that these energies, called by the yogis prana, can be apprehended and taken up not by the physical body that we know so well, but can be taken up by this ether body. And according to the yogis, this prana, or energy coming from the sun, can be absorbed into this ether body. Man does not live by bread alone. He lives by other energies as well, not by metabolic energy, but such energies as prana. And we must understand that there are other hierarchies of life that are using our planet, other hierarchies of life that need this prana, which saturates the planet on a fine day, or parts of the planet on fine days. Man is something more than gas, liquid, and solid. That is, if you can't appreciate that tonight, then you will never understand much about our subject of angels. We must also concern ourselves with an even subtler material, a subtler material called astral or emotional substance that interpenetrates our world. Emotional substance. And the suggestion that there is an astral world interpenetrating our earth to a depth of about 5,000 miles below the surface of the earth and reaching way out into space almost as far as the moon. This great astral planet made of emotional substance. And this astral world, and I won't carry on with it, but there it is, a huge structure, is part of a structure being created by man himself, because man lives within this astral world. On the surface of the planet, he possesses an astral body. There it is, made up of emotional substance. And he is part of that astral world. More than that, according to ancient teachings, we are emotional beings who have put together an astral body as we grew up, and we give off our emotional energy, I'm giving off emotional energy at the moment, creating a lecture, creating in this room an atmosphere of emotion, and you are doing the same, and we are exchanging in this atmos, this emotional atmos. And so man creates not only an emotional structure of his own, which he uses to express himself in art, perhaps, or sexuality, or in new experience, but he generates the astral world. It is from the astral bodies of 6 billion people that the astral world is being fashioned. And these matters are important. In ancient traditions, the Greek injunction was, man, know thyself. And if you know yourselves, you will know the universe. And if you don't understand these factors about yourself, then you are wasting your time looking into such ethereal matters as angels. And so we are emotional beings. We're not concerned tonight with the structure of these different bodies that we possess, their integration, taking into account what we call force centers of yoga. We're not concerned with spiritual growth tonight. What we're concerned with is the possibility that there exist hierarchies of life, using these different states of matter to express themselves and to evolve. And one of these streams is said to be that of angels. Man himself, of course, is a mental being. In his right mind, I should say, he is a mental being. And the mental world or plane interpenetrates the others. There is a vast mental globe which is being created very rapidly now by the mental polarization of mankind. We are becoming mental beings. We are beginning to integrate a mental body, and our thought forms are structures that tend to generate this mental world that interpenetrates the others and goes beyond the extent of our astral world. Collectively and together, we form what is known as the human aura. The human aura. And the human aura is an emission of the various energies that I have been talking about. Mental energy, emotional energy, and so on. Now, when you take into account these various interpenetrating structures and their energies, you have the basis for the concept of believing that there are one or two of these hierarchies that are spiritually possessed, in the sense that they are angelic in nature. Is there any evidence for all this? The yogis themselves have come into our Western laboratories, our medical laboratories, and have proved the existence of their powers, which they say have been based on these structures that I am describing. We must say also that when we look into the field of science, we find that science has gone further than solid, liquid, and gas, beyond the ionic and the etheric that I have described, beyond the etheric, into what we now call, I'm calling here, the staggering fact that this material here actually obeys laws that are unlike our own in many respects. And the world of quanta is sensitive to two extraordinary forces that some of you know about and which have been associated with angels and religions for thousands of years. And the first is that the emotional substance, or the quanta that I'm talking about, is sensitive to faith. Science is dealing with substance that is sensitive to faith, to the application of belief. And we have been talking about this for centuries. And those of us who believe in faith healing, who believe in things like esoteric healing, whether it is acupuncture, whether it is any of the factors of alternative medicine, have always said that faith is an important factor when you are dealing with healing. He has the faith in the doctor that will bring him relief and succor. Not only faith, ladies and gentlemen, is being shown to affect this level of tiny particles, but also the element of will. He has the will to live. And if he has the will to live, he can do something here with a subtle substance which enables him to recover and to regenerate. And it's important to realize the developments in science that have occurred. And when we look at dark matter, this undiscovered substance here interpenetrating the stars, when we look at it, we have to say to ourselves, what is it? What is it? This subtle substance. It is there because the substance creates magnetic fields. We know it is there, but you can see through it. You can see for millions of light years through this subtle substance. And this is the sort of substance I'm talking about, because in ancient days we used to say there are elements of the spiritual nature of man in these different grades of substance that I have colored here in yellow. In Theosophy, we call it Atma, the divine persistent will. We have to use a Hindu term for it. Some of the spiritual substance is Atma. Some of it is Buddhi, compassion, love, wisdom, empathy. And the extraordinary factor about this material or energy which we call Buddhi is that we have a vehicle of it. And when we grow spiritually, we accumulate this spiritual substance, this spiritual essence in our auras. And our auras are transformed by it. And if we can understand that, then we can see some of the difficulties which arise when we look at the matter of the angels, the angelic hosts. What do we mean by angels? We mean that some of the religions that you and I have participated in have described a hierarchy of beings said to be close to God, to the divine, that somehow is able to sustain those beings, humans, that we call saintly, religious, divine. I can only tell you about some of the things that I have found in my own life, which I hope do not in any way deny you your beliefs. I am, as I say, scientifically oriented. I'm artistic in that I write poetry. I am a businessman. I'm like you. I haven't had an immaculate conception, which makes me different. I'm human. And so I must tell you what I know about this subject. And I can only tell you a very little tonight because our time is limited. I'm going to use a few scientific terms, but I promise you they won't hurt. Angels are pre-Mendelic. Gregor Mendel, was the man that discovered heredity. By examining the growth of peas, he was able to determine your heredity and my heredity. But when we look at angels, they are unrelated to anything heredity, anything to do with heredity. You can't trace a parentage in them. You can't go back and find the chromosomes of an angel's grandfather. And so we have to talk about angels as being pre-Mendelic. They don't have a genetic code. They're not constructed by the DNA through the DNA molecule. So this is an important thing as you approach the subject of angels. Secondly, they don't multiply. They don't have children, angels. And therefore, from my observation, they have diminished, whether they are in mental substance or in emotional substance, they have diminished to nothing. And one of the reasons is that our world of the unconscious, and you and I are living in it, there are structures here that you know nothing about, perhaps some of them related to King Alfred, is it, in this area? Structures which are Gothic, structures which relate to Christianity, and together we call these structures the collective unconscious of mankind. And these structures lie accessible to some individuals in this emotional world which we call the astral. And yes, the Gothic cathedrals with their rose windows have populated the astral or the world of emotion. We have generated feeling. You and I as Christians, perhaps in the Colosseum, perhaps later as monks in our cells, we have created the kind of structures and emotional substance which have been populated with angels. And these have occurred through the centuries, the building of these structures, and there have been angelic hosts. No one's denying that. No one is denying that angels have existed. But when the scientists get their heads together, when you get Rupert Sheldrake, a brilliant young scientist of today who is a theosophist, which means he understands the principles involved here, and you start to talk to them, such scientists, about angels and so on, the thing that concerns us is that this whole facade, this whole compartmentalization of the astral world, containing in it worlds of angels, compartments of angels of different kinds that we have read about in our religious teachings, perhaps. This whole world has been recently, in the last 200, 300 years, with the Industrial Revolution, with the birth of science, with the birth of facts and figures and statistics, this whole world has been replaced. It has been broken down by the youngsters of yesterday who have grown up and have given us the automobile and the aeroplane and the airship and the submarine and science fiction. And instead of their being generated by religious devotees in their monasteries, an atmosphere, a structure there that supports angels, that support has gone. There is very, very little left there that can support the kind of emotional or astral figures, structures which we associate with angels. Now that doesn't mean to say that a person does not see an angel, in that he creates or she creates an angelic figure persistently again and again in emotional or astral substance. We all have dreams. And people say, well, what is the meaning of a dream? And the answer to that is that the meaning of a dream, one of them anyway, is that it shows you that there are other worlds than this one. That there are other constructs than the constructs of this world, which so many people value because it is material. And this world has gone mad on materialism and must not expect to find angelic structures surviving in a world in which people value solid things, liquid structures, gaseous structures, houses. Nothing wrong with valuing your house. But the world has gone crazy and is oriented to material things, to scientific structures, to industry, and the infrastructure of the angels has been destroyed. What else do we know about them? Well, I've just said they were once created and sustained by religious faith. They were sustained by the devotion of people praying in the monasteries, in the churches. They were sustained by religious idealism. Nothing wrong with that. But when you take all that away and you find attendance at churches in England down to 2% or 3% or something like that, you cannot expect that infrastructure of the angels to persist. In fact, it has gone. Angels exist only in our minds and in the outermost regions of the astral world. But what do we mean by that? You know what we mean by that. You know that when you fall asleep at night, the astral body comes out of alignment with the physical. Well known if you have studied this subject. What happens is the moment that you fall asleep, your astral body comes out of alignment with the physical, and it recharges with emotional energy. And when you awaken in the morning, it comes back into alignment and you feel emotionally refreshed by sleep. And sleep is the way in which the astral body can recharge itself from the astral world with energy. But during the night, if you have been emotionally frustrated during the day, if your emotional nature has not had the response sexually from the one you love, if you work at a job that has no emotional satisfaction in it, if you are searching, as most people do, for new experience in life and you don't get it, if you have the desire for self-aggrandizement, I want letters after my name, and you don't get it, then you are emotionally frustrated. And when you are emotionally frustrated, the astral body, falling asleep, the astral body will leave the physical, and it will go out into this astral world. And it will search in the many compartments there, whether they are meant to sustain angels or not. There are thousands and thousands of scenarios out there. Perhaps this street and church in the astral world. We have generated these scenarios. And we go into these scenarios and we live out a few hours of experience there. And we call this OBE, out-of-body experience. And millions of people are having this experience of being out of the body and finding themselves in this other world. Now, that is not my subject tonight, but it is a reality, it is a fact of life. People drop down dead in the street, and when they fall down dead in the street with a heart attack, their astral bodies come out of alignment the moment they die. And if they are rescued within 4, 5, 6 minutes by a crews of medics, and they are brought back to life after that time, the astral body comes back into alignment, and they have memory of where they have been during that period of being dead for 5 minutes. They have suffered clinical death, and they have been returned to life, and they remember being somewhere else, in a world as real as this one, a world that you can touch, taste, and see in with as much reality as this one. These are the facts of life. And there are millions having these experiences because millions of people are being rescued from the jaws of death, suffering from cerebrovascular accident, which we mean is a stroke. They are dead for a few minutes, clinically dead, and are resuscitated and remember having experiences in this astral world. And so things have changed. We know today, if you talk to a person like myself, that yes, this astral world does go below the level of the earth, does give some sort of credence to the Catholic proposition of a hell state, that certainly the highest regions of emotional experience are in the periphery of the astral world. There it is, the periphery, the highest vibratory rates of astral substance in the periphery of the astral world, the lowest of the vibratory rates in the astral world going 5,000 miles below the level of the earth. And this is the place that we call the so-called hell state. The great religions have their heaven states, whether it is Christian, whether it is Muslim, whether it is Hindu. They are on the periphery of the astral world. And it is there, ladies and gentlemen, that we find grades of beings in the astral world who may be regarded as angelic, but they are not angels. They are humans that have been. They are humans that are there in the periods between lives. And they are not angels. Angels are something that have died out. They have died out, and they were very, very real in biblical history. Nobody's denying that. But that was the kind of atmosphere that was created in biblical times. Unfortunately, there are great changes going on in these inner worlds that we have to give credence to, and they are very real indeed. But let me consider some other matters with regard to angels. Angels have existed. Swedenborg spent 40 years as a scientist investigating the nature, the character of angels. Geoffrey Hodgson, a theosophist who only died a few years ago, spent most of his life sensing the presence of angelic beings in special areas of nature, in wooded areas, sensing the presence of what would be better described as devas, as planetary spirits, if you like, spirits of the woods, spirits on different planes, as it were. We call them sometimes fairies, fairies of the woods, fairies of the rivers, aerial types. And we must understand that today in the astral world there are just such beings at all levels. They are spirits, but they are not angels. And whilst I don't want to denigrate those people's impressions of having experienced angels, let's look a little bit further into this matter. And yes, question time will come later. I'm interested tonight in the Christian concept of angels, not the Muslim paradise and its entities, nor the Hindu, but the Christian concept of angels. It is said they were found around saintly people. They were figured in biblical history, in the lives of Abraham and Isaac and Daniel and Moses. That's what the Bible tells us. Fourthly, often they were angels with wings outspread, not just something that may have protruded from the back, but wings that were outspread. Correct me if I'm wrong later on. Angels that were able somehow to reach us instantaneously, to be able to soar through the ethers and reach us wherever we were or were on earth. Angels who were messengers of the divine, of God. That is another part of their nature.